Welcome back, everybody. We are going to be comparing what seems to be another addition to the metric buttload of options we have in the compact, subcompact, and slimline world, and that is going to be the new Hellcat Pro as compared to the Glock 43X MOS. Now, it's really a good time for all of us out there as far as the options go when it comes to pistols, rifles, everything. We have more now than I have ever seen before. And it seems to be that manufacturers are finally giving the market what it wants. And for me and a lot of other people like you and me, it's something that's concealable, light, has good capacity, and is still manageable in size out there in the range. Things like the Hellcat Pro, the Glock 43X, the Glock 43.8, the 365 XL, even the new Mossberg MC2 SC. We have got some really good options all throughout that price spectrum. And more of these comparison videos will come for this size category, but for today we are going to focus on the Hellcat Pro, the newest offering from Springfield, and that Glock 43X MOS, which has been my EDC for pretty much most of last year, especially throughout last summer, because of the carryability and all of the options that it gave. But before we jump into the specs, the feel, the performance, and all that range footage for the 43X MOS and that Hellcat Pro, I want to give a huge shout to TriStar Trading. They handle the merchandise for the channel, especially these new hats. Link down below, massive support structure for not only me, but a bunch of other tube channels here in the Second Amendment community. So if you're interested in any of that stuff, the link is down below in the description. Let's go ahead and tackle the specs on these. Now, if you want the detailed videos on both of these, where I get into all the nuts and bolts, I will post the original individual reviews down below. This is going to be an overall of both of these. We're not going to get too far into the weeds on all of the finite details. Starting with that Glock 43X MOS, we know this is a 9mm striker fired setup. We have a capacity of 10 rounds at those factory magazines, 3.41-inch barrel, 16.26 ounces without the magazine, 18.55 with the magazine on empty. Total length of 6.5 inches, a slide length of 6.06, and then a width of 1.10 inches. Overall, not bad. The 43X is going to give us a single slot for an attachment up front, whether it's a light or a laser. Pretty standard looking Glock. You do get front serrations, rear serrations, and you're gonna get that very standard Gen 5 stipple pattern on there and no finger grooves, which is definitely a plus if you don't like the finger grooves. And of course, it is cut for that RMSC style optic. And we will do an up close side-by-side comparison of these, and of course trigger pulls and all that, so you can get a really good visual idea of the feel and size difference in the hand, or at least in my hands. You guys can get an idea of just how these two kind of stack up. But on to the basic specs of the Hellcat Pro. Again, we know this is a striker fired polymer 9mm pistol. This one comes in a 3.7-inch barreled configuration. It's got two 15-round magazines, total grip width of 1 inch, weighing in at 21 ounces, 6.6 inches in overall length, and a height of 4.8 inches. So you can tell it is just this much bigger than the 43X overall in that length. Well, being that triggers is always something that comes up when it comes to pistols, especially smaller pistols, because generally the smaller the pistol, the worse the trigger is. Let's take a really good up close look at the function of both of these triggers and do some trigger pulls. All right, here we are up close and personal, and I know you love these moments between us right here. So comparing the triggers of the Hellcat Pro and the Glock 43X MOS, let's go ahead and talk about the feels first, if feels is actually a word. You notice you're going to have a trigger shoe safety on the Hellcat, which is going to go completely flush on a mostly flat face trigger with a little tiny bit of a hook at the bottom. So you're gonna have a decent amount of take up, which is pretty smooth. You're gonna hit that hard wall, and there's gonna be a break. So not much creep, if any at all. I'll try to go slow. That reset on it is solid. You can feel it, you can hear it. I'll try and go as slow as possible. It's just a break. So really no actual creep on the Hellcat, at least measurable to the human finger. So we will compare the 43X MOS to it now, and then we'll put them both on the gauge. So trigger shoe safety does not go flush on the Glock trigger, which is kind of a point of contention between some people that don't like Glock triggers. A little bit more of a curved design, about the same amount of take up on it. Right there, we're gonna hit a wall, little bit of creep, not bad on this one. Some are much worse. Reset again is solid, you can hear it, you can feel it. Little creep and a break. So overall, not bad at all. And these are all stock internals in here. Let's go ahead, put them on the gauge, and we'll start with the 43X MOS right here. And I'm trying to pull from the same place on each one each time. Glock triggers tend to slip a little bit just like that. So I kind of got to hook it and then move back. A little bit tough on these small ones. Okay, slipped up a little bit. So that one was over 6 pounds, 6 pounds and about 6 ounces. We're gonna do 3 pulls for each because that gauge tends to slip up like that. It's real hard to get them in a consistent place on the Glock trigger shoe. That pulled a little lower because I was lower on the shoe. Just under 5 pounds, about 4 pounds and 14 ounces. So we'll try and get somewhere similar on that trigger shoe. There we go. And we are right there at about 5 pounds, almost dead nuts again. Maybe a hair under, which is about what that trigger feels like. It's got a pretty good amount of rounds through it at this point, so that's what I would expect. All right, the Hellcat. All right, that one broke right there at 5 pounds, 5.5 pounds, almost exactly. Leave me a comment if you want me to get a digital gauge at this point. Should probably stop cheaping out and get something new, huh? All right, set this up again. Try and get low like I did on the Glock. That one right there is gonna be a little bit lighter, about 5 pounds and maybe 6 ounces. A little hair under that. And the final one here, unless we get something weird. All right, slipped up a little bit, but very consistent, about 5 pounds and a little under 6 ounces again. So overall, those are the weights, those are the feels. Let's move on. Now that you know how that trigger is gonna feel and function, what it's gonna kind of pull like, let's talk about the performance of these two on the range, starting with that 43X MOS. Like I said, this has been my EDC piece for about a year for the vast majority of the summer, even into the winter, light carry clothing. The thing out there performs great. It has almost a perfect grip size on it because it's a little bit bigger than a 43, a little bit smaller than 19, and it's very, very manageable out there on the range. Even doing reload drills, transition drills, anything like that, it's a really good size. And with those Shield Arms magazines, you're getting that 15 round capacity to keep you going out there having fun training or whatever you are doing with it. When it comes to the recoil management out there, it's everything you're going to expect out of a slimline, subcompact, micro compact pistol, but a little bit better than some others because it has a really good grip size. But don't go into this expecting to get the recoil management of a 1911 or a Glock 34 or a much larger pistol. You're going to know you have something pretty small in your hands, but again, it is very manageable out there on the range. For reload drills to recoil management, you're not gonna have any problems as long as you have a good grip. When it comes to working and yanking that trigger out there, I think we all know Glock triggers are not the best. The tactile feel of them with that trigger shoe safety is pretty bad. Leaves a lot to be desired, but it is definitely usable. It is a combat duty style-esque trigger, I guess you could say. But the slim lines are known for being quite a bit grittier and quite a bit more heavy, at least until you break them and wear them and polish them or just flat out change them, and then they're gonna have a far better feel. But overall, the feel out there on the range has been a very positive one with the 43X, which is why I've been carrying it as an EDC. All right, so the new one on the block, the Hellcat Pro right there. Now this is minimally larger than the 43X MOS or the 43X, slightly smaller than the 48, slightly smaller all around than the Glock 19, but it's just a little bit more controllable out there. And I think that has to do with a couple of things about this that we'll talk about in a second. Now the Hellcat Pro seems to be just the perfect size, even for my larger hands, because of the way it fits in there. It gives me just a little bit more grip and just a tiny bit more length than the 43X MOS, but it's still in that general size category and gives me those 15 round factory magazines to keep that thing fed out there on the range. The recoil control on this thing is great, and the ability to really run from like pocket reloads and stuff like that out there is definitely improved because you do have just a little bit more grip, but you still have that flush fitting magazine, so you can conceal that secondary magazine with something like a Neomag, which is pretty much what I use out there when I'm testing my EDC pieces, as I did in this video. And between the size of the grip and that texture that they put on this thing all the way around, that sandpaper texture, even up on the front of that frame with those reference points, it gives you a lot of traction to really control that recoil impulse, because again, this is a smaller pistol, and the original Hellcats are definitely known for being a little bit more snappy. When it comes to the trigger on the Hellcat Pro, I would say it's definitely an improvement over the Glock 43X or the Glocks in general. It's got a pretty flat face, flush feeling shoe safety on there. Minimal creep on that pull, but it's much smoother right out of the box than the 43X is. But again, triggers are very touchy things to certain people, and certain people like what they like, and you will just never talk them out of that. But to me, the Hellcat just feels a little bit better right out of the box. One thing I did notice with the Hellcat, especially when drawing this from the holster, is I tend to over grab, or I overreach when I grab for this. And I don't know if it's because I've been carrying the Glock so much, but I tend to kind of extend around the grip too much, which when I go to present, puts my muzzle way off to the right. So some of that could be because I've damaged this hand and had some surgery on it, and I had some nerve damage in there. But I really have to concentrate on getting that first knuckle right there up under that trigger guard and then presenting out, because if I just go for it, I tend to over grab, and then I'm all kind of cattywampus and trying to realign my grip. I don't know if any of you guys have experienced that out there. Maybe it's because it's just ever so different, a little bit more blocky and square here on the grip, that I tend to do that. If you know why, or you've experienced that, definitely let me know in the comments. I know some people are probably already butthurt because they feel that I crapped on their favorite pistol, whether it's the Hellcat or the Glock 43X MOS. But these are honestly two really good choices out there. But there are a few things that kind of set these two apart, or kind of good things that separate one from the other. When it comes to that Hellcat, look at all the grip texture. All the way around the grip, high up into the frame right there. That's a lot of grip, and all of that grip really does help you control that recoil impulse out there on the range. I will also say that the trigger on the Hellcat, it's smooth, it's a little cleaner on that brake, and I do like the way it feels overall quite a bit better than the Glock. And the big one is the ability to get those 15 round factory magazines, flush fit like that, while still maintaining basically the same size profile as that 43X. But you cannot count out the Glock 43X MOS, because it is just overall an absolutely great package, especially with those 15 round Shield Arms magazines. Now, probably my favorite thing about the 43X MOS is there's just ever so slight of a little pinky edge right there on the bottom of that grip. Now, what that does for me is it really keeps my pinky from falling off the grip like that, and I have found myself doing that on the Hellcat more than once, but it keeps my hand really high up on that grip, which helps again control that recoil impulse. So that is definitely something that is a huge positive when it comes to the Glock. The other thing is, it's Glock. It's got an insane reputation for durability, reliability, and just lasting like as long as cockroaches do at this point. And of course, the aftermarket is littered with parts for the Glock. You can pretty much get anything. And as I've often said before, even grandma got herself some Glock parts somewhere up in the attic. I will say that the texture on the Glock on the grip though is pretty anemic. And out there in the Arizona sun, especially in the summer, I find myself wanting more grit, more texture to keep a hold of that thing as my hands start to get sweaty and the thing starts to get slippery in the hand, because it's a smaller pistol and it's easier to lose control of it with more recoil. So what about that direct size? Let's take a good up close look again at how these are gonna fit in my hand. I wear double XL size gloves and kind of right next to each other, so you can get a really good idea, because these are so close in size to each other, yet you get 10 rounds in the Glock and you get 15 rounds in that Hellcat Pro. All right, so let's compare the size to these things to give you guys a good idea. That is the Glock 43X MOS in my hand, and this is the Hellcat Pro in my hand. So I've got decent sized hand. I wear 2XL gloves, but I want to give you guys a really good idea of the actual side-by-side comparison, kind of backplate to backplate style right here. So you can see right there, you got a little bit more length in that Hellcat, but just ever so slight, not a ton, a little less than I would say, well, maybe right at about 1/4 of an inch. And then in the width, they are extremely similar, almost exactly the same, until you get down to the little bumps on the Glock frame itself, which is a little bit wider overall than the Hellcat. When it comes to the length, with the magazines in there, you can see they are about exactly the same. Now, removing the mags, because I do have the Shield Arms mags in here, but they are almost exactly the same profile as the Glock. You can see you will get that tiny bit of extension right there on the Hellcat, because that's where the magazine fits in. Get this right in place the best I can for you. So you'll see slight difference in the grip right there. You've got about that much of a difference in there. Put the mag in to really give you guys a solid idea of that difference right there between the Hellcat Pro and the 43X MOS. But again, that all disappears once you put the magazine in here. Now, talking about the size in the hand, you can see right there, that is my big old hand on that 43X MOS. Little bit of a pinky ledge right there, and that's pretty much how that is going to fit in my hand to give you a really good idea. Now, talking about the Hellcat Pro right here, you can see it's going to be very, very similar where my pinky rests on that, but you do have a little bit more down there because that is where that mag fits inside the frame. So again, good idea there. We'll dual hand these to give you guys kind of an idea, since my hands are about the same size, just to give you a really good idea of where hands are going to fit on this. Should you have bigger hands or a medium-sized hand, now you kind of have a really good reference. All right, so we are at the point where we talk about problems and issues out on the range. I'm happy to report back, I've had zero problems or issues with either of these out there on the range, which is pretty much what I expected at this point. Glock is very well proven at this point. And if you don't know, the Hellcat Pro right here from Springfield is actually made by HS Product and imported under the Springfield Armory name. So this pistol has been out there in the world for quite some time and has been tested quite reliably in other places by HS Product, and now is the Hellcat Pro. So I wouldn't expect to have any failures at this point with either of them. And I don't really beat on them to the point where I'm trying to break them. That always helps as well as like cleaning and maintaining your firearms, which you should do regularly. Well, I know that was a lot of information, but these are really two tough choices out there, and we all have a lot of tough choices as long as you're not a brand loyalist at this point and you're willing to keep an open mind. Because between the Hellcat Pro, the Hellcat, the 43, the 43X, the 365, the MC2C, even some of the Taurus GX4 stuff, we've got an astounding amount of options when it comes to micros, subs, and just really easy to carry stuff out there in today's world, which is definitely a nice change from the days of old. And I'm not here to change anybody's mind, whether you are looking for the 43X or whether you are talking about the Hellcat Pro, but I definitely think you would be doing yourself a disservice if you didn't compare these two to each other, especially if you're new to the market and you're not just kind of a default Glock person, because there are a lot of people that just kind of buy Glock by default because of all the law enforcement contracts and Glock's perfection marketing, which Glocks are great. There's no such thing as perfection. But for me, like I said, I have been carrying the 43X MOS with those Shield Arms mags for about a year, but I am going to be carrying this Hellcat Pro a lot more just to get a better feel for it, because it quite literally gives me everything I want and need out of an EDC pistol, from the size, carryability, and especially the big one, that capacity that we seem to always get in fights about. So I'm really curious to know what your thoughts are between these two, or if you've experienced one or the other. So definitely let me know down in the comments. Go ahead and get subbed up. Leave me a comment on whatever your preference is in the micro or subcompact world. Give the video a like if you are into it. Remember to check out TriStar Trading, link in the description for the hats. Will you all get out there on the range and have some fun, whether it's with a Hellcat Pro or a 43X MOS. And remember, if you stay ready, you ain't got to get ready. I will see you guys on the next one.